Let's find out if applications are running on the user's computer. Alright, so today I'm going to show you guys how to find out if certain applications are running on your user's computer, and I'll show you the code that should run on Windows, Mac, and Linux. So if you want to have your application run on multiple platforms, you certainly can. Now, I don't know if the names of these applications may be slightly different on different platforms. I would assume they're not, but I don't know. And if you want to be extra safe, you can always double check the command yourself to make sure that it is correct. And always, especially when you're working with commands like this, double check and even triple check that you have written it correctly. The last thing you would want to do is write some bad code or write a command incorrectly and then either ruin your own surprise or do something to your machine or the user's machine that you don't intend to happen. Alright, so this is essentially what we're doing here. So I've gone ahead and I've just ran it 3 times so we can determine if OBS was running, if Notepad was running, and if Discord is running. So you can see it there with 3 different applications, and it works perfectly fine. Now, I'm going to go ahead. All I've got here running in the script, or all we got here in the scene, is I just have a control node and a label, and this control node is what is actually running the detection. And you guys said that you wanted me to write out the code so that you could better understand it, or at least the majority of you did, I should say. As if we take a look at the poll, at the current time, we're at 25 votes, and we got, again, we almost come back to a 50-50, but it is leaning towards writing the code, even though the videos would become longer. So we're going to do that this time. We're going to write all of the code out. So let's go ahead and hop into the script. Alright, so I've gone ahead and deleted everything out of my script so we can take a look at it from a fresh perspective. Alright, so what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to have my ready function. You can create this in your own if you want, but since I'm just going to call mine from the ready function, this is all I'm going to need. Or, I'm sorry, it's bad words. Not all I'm going to need, but this is where I'm going to make my call and change the text of my label. And to do this, I'm going to store my result as a variable. And I'm going to do is OBS running. And none of that is the way that it should have gone. So I'm going to say is OBS running as my variable. That's going to be a bool. And we're going to set that equal to a function that we're going to create. I'll check if at running, and that will take 1 argument of a string. Now this string is going to be the name of the application. So if you're doing OBS, it's going to be OBS in all lowercase 64. And then I'm just going to edit the text of my label. I'm going to paste that in there. So I'm going to say label.text equals is OBS running, and then I'm going to add the true or false, the value that gets returned and stored into our variable. Now the error that is here is screaming because, well, our variable is screaming because we don't have this function, and then our text is screaming because our variable is screaming. So I'm going to go down and we'll go ahead and create the function for this. So sorry, there should be 2 spaces in between. Paste that in, and we're going to have an argument. Remember, we're passing in a string. So this is going to be our app name. And this is going to return out to us a boolean. So arrow bool, then we can put our colon, drop down to the next line, I'll write pass, and you can see all of our errors have disappeared. Sorry, it's going to yell at me there because I need to return something. There we go. Now let's take a look at the top. That's yelling because my variable is a different name. So I'll paste that in and fix that. There we go. Okay. So now that we have this function, we're going to need 2 variables that we're going to use here. One is going to be the output that we're going to get from executing this code, or executing the command, whatever you want to call it. And one is going to be the exit code for us to check for. So we'll go ahead and we'll say var output. That's going to be an array. We can set that equal to an empty one just to be safe here, and say var exit code will be an int. And by default, we'll set that to 0. Now, this is where we're going to do a match, because we need to call a different command based on if it's a Mac, a Windows, or Linux system, as well as put in a catch-all, which is the default or wildcard that you may also know it as. So let's go ahead. We're going to match os.get name, and this is going to return to us Windows, Mac OS, Linux, Android. I think iOS is the other one that it's listed as. Now, of course, the Android and iOS, we're going to completely ignore. Those are going to fall under our wildcard. And we're only going to be looking at the Windows, Mac, and Linux routes. So we'll put a colon there, drop down. These are going to be strings that come back. So we'll say Windows, that's capital S. Now, that is important because this is case sensitive. So we'll say Mac OS with a capital OS in there. Add a pass in there. And our last one will be Linux. I'll throw a pass in there. And our final result is the wildcard, which is just an underscore. And this will catch everything. So if it doesn't match Windows, Mac OS, or Linux, then it's going to fall into this category. And all I'm going to do here is I'm going to print supported OS or checking running applications. Wow, that was not written correctly. And that should be 2 P's. There we go. Written applications, running applications, and in our wildcard, we're going to just return false. So, what do we do in the case of a Windows, Mac, or Linux situation? Well, I'm going to go ahead and just copy this in, just because it's going to be a lot easier to write this, and I have a different variable name there. Here we go. All right, so in Windows, we're going to take our exit code variable, and we're going to set that. I like to have an empty space in between there. We're going to set that to os.execute. So what execute is going to do, if I just hover my mouse over here, you'll see, hopefully you can see that, because if I move my mouse, it can run a little bit, and hover. You can see it takes a path string, and then it takes the arguments, and then an output, read, the open console, etc. And what this essentially is going to do is this command, or this function, allows us to execute. Basically, we can run commands. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that down. But what execute is basically going to allow us to run commands, such as if you were to write it in your CMD, your terminal, right? Things like that. It'll allow us to run those kind of commands. Now, what we're going to run in, if we're in Windows, we're going to run task list, all lowercase, as a string, comma. We're going to pass in an array because this is our arguments. And as a string, we have /fi in capitals, comma. Our second argument is also going to be a string, and that's going to be image name, all capitals, no space. And we'll have space, EQ, space, and that'll be the end of our string. Then we'll do plus our app name that we pass in, plus.exe as a string. Because this is a Windows system, so we know it's going to be an executable file. The next argument is going to be a string of /nh, capital letters, of course. and that'll end our array. And then the third thing for us to pass in here to the OS execute command is going to be our output variable. And this is basically anything that gets outputted from the console after running this command is going to be stored inside of this variable that we stored here. So output is going to contain whatever the result is that we get back, right? Whatever gets spat out from OS execute. And then we can store the overall exit code. Right? And we're doing a similar thing with Mac and Linux. And the difference is Mac and Linux are going to be a lot shorter. We're just going to run the command pgrep. The arguments we're going to pass in is going to be a string of -x, and as well as the app name. And then we're going to capture it, whatever comes out of it, as the output. And we'll do the same thing with Linux. Now, it's great. So the next set that we have, now that we have all of our matches set up, is we need to check one more thing. And that's going to be our exit code. So we're going to say if our exit code is not equal to 0, then what we're going to do is return false. All right, and we're almost done. So we have this. We just now have to get whatever the output is to know whether the application is running. And we can do this in simply one if-else statement, because Windows will have its own condition and then Mac and Linux will have the same result on their own. All right, so we're going to create a variable. I'm going to call this result. All right, results. This will be a string. This will be equal to output index 0. So whatever that first argument is, that's what we're going to take out of it. Now we can say if os.getName equals Windows. Now notice we're doing an if check here instead of a match, because with a match we kind of have to split everything up, and we need to have that wildcard here just in case it's a system that's not supported by our game or application, whatever it is. Whereas with the if statement here, we just have to know, is it a Windows or is it not a Windows? All right, so we're going to say if os.getName is equal to Windows, then what we're going to do is we're going to return appname.toLower, because these are all going to be in lowercase here, in our results.toLower, and we do this just to make sure that we don't have to worry about any casing issues. So we're basically going to return whether or not our app is inside of our list of results, right? Because that first output here is going to be a list of everything, all the applications that are running on the computer. So we're saying if the app we're looking for is one of those results that are running, then we return true. And if it's not in there, then we return false. So else, if it's not a Windows machine, then we can just return our results.strip edges not equal to an empty string. Alright, so if we go ahead and run this, and remember we're looking for OBS 64. Now since I'm recording, obviously OBS is running, so this will come back true for us. Alright, but if I were to put something in here like Notepad and run that, we're going to get back false. Now if I were to go ahead and run Notepad, so we come in here, we go Notepad. That is not how you spell Notepad. Alright, we come in, we run Notepad. Here it is, we know it's running. I'll just leave it off to the side there while we run this. And we can see here it is, running and true. Alright, so with that information now, you can now take that and with your variable here that you can have stored wherever And this could be, again, global. It could be just running right when you want to make the check. Doesn't matter. It's completely up to you. But now you can take this and say, oh, if it is running, now we can have this special unique scene play out. And if it's not running, we can have this standard scene play out. If it is running, maybe you get a little creepy with it, and you have a small bot that's programmed into your game that connects to that user's channel. You can't really get that channel though. But you get the idea, right? You can do something interesting. Now, there are some games out there that definitely do this and give you a surprise. I'm not going to mention which ones they are, but they're out there. They do exist. And if you want to add that extra level of interactivity, maybe freak out the player a little bit, this is one way that you can do it. Alright, everyone, take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one.